Last but not least, Chapter 11, Cancer Epidemiology, or Causes of Cancer, what we know as of today, is what we'll be covering in this lecture. If you think that this is something that you don't have to participate in, that's great. Go to page 293 through 296 and review the Do You Understand or Did You Understand section, and you may be able to skip this lecture altogether. So here's what we know. In the United States, cancer rates are decreasing, and the death rates related to cancer are decreasing. So essentially, what we have done with our cancer research, although we have not found a cure, we have significantly decreased the impact of cancer on deaths in America, and we have relegated cancer to much like a chronic disease in that it has remission and recurrent patterns as opposed to a continuous downward spiral. We do know that there's a lot of cancers that are environmental, or environmental factors factor into the acquisition of cancer, and that this external environment or key associations and causes of cancer are more significantly environmental than they are genetic. If you go to your book on page 267, there's a great visual about the key associations and causes of cancer that kind of summarize this lecture. So there's some real interesting data there. So what environmental or lifestyle factors can we control, and in controlling that, decrease our risk factors for cancer? So we know that cigarette smoking is bad for you. We know it's bad for you because it causes lung cancer, but it doesn't just cause lung cancer, it causes all kinds of cancers. So look at this: lung, urinary tract, respiratory tract, liver, kidney, pancreas, cervix, uterus, linked to leukemia. And smoking includes anything that you smoke: cigar smoke, pipe smoking. We haven't done a whole lot of studies on marijuana, but I now, with the legalization in many states, I believe that we will have some data about how cancer and smoking marijuana relates. But the bottom line here is this is an environmental or a lifestyle factor that can be controlled and decrease your risk for cancer. We know that there are significant nutritional exposures that predispose us to dietary habits that predispose us to cancer. We know that eating too much red meat is bad for us. We know that a diet lacking in fiber and fruit and vegetables significantly increases our risk of cancer. We know that eating high amounts of sugar predisposes us to cancer risks. We're finding out more and more the side effects of obesity in terms of insulin production, the alterations that happen in sexual hormones as a result of the release, and the fat-related cytokinin response, inflammatory response, are all mechanisms that we know have an impact on obesity-associated cancer risks. As we delve into the study of obesity more, this chronic inflammatory process caused by obesity and the toll that it takes on the body in terms of its alteration from homeostasis will become more evident, I think, as we continue to study it. We know that drinking too much alcohol puts you at risk, particularly for the types of cancers that are listed in this slide. We know that alcohol consumption is also guided, whether you can stop or not stop, or the addiction factor has a genetic link. And we know that there is no safe limit of what this intake is, although, you do see occasional studies about wine being good for you, but we know that alcohol consumption in general is not a good thing. Another risk factor is a lack of physical exercise. We know that lack of physical exercise is a problem and a risk factor for cancer. We know specifically that an increase in physical activity is related to a decrease in breast, colon, and other kinds of cancers. Mainly because this physical activity decreases obesity, improves gut motility, and we're learning more and more about the gut being our center for our immune system. And we know that if we have decreased obesity, we have a decreased inflammatory response, and in that lack of inflammatory environment, we have less free radicals to age our cells. So we know that this is a big deal to get physical activity on board to reduce cancer. We know that ionizing radiation causes cancer, so we try to limit our exposure to these kinds of radiation that cause mutation in our cells. This includes ultraviolet radiation. We know that in the advent of our electronic age, we're doing more research to understand how electromagnetic radiation from cell phones, microwaves, and computers may or may not play a role in causing cancer. So in your generation, you'll probably have another slide here about limiting that kind of exposure. We know that there are infectious, sexual, and reproductive types of cancer that are related to sexual activity. Those top causing cancer infections are HPV, hepatitis B and C, and H. pylori isn't an infection. It's not a sexual issue, but we know that it is the key ingredient for all kinds of stomach cancers. Just some data about HPV. This is one of the sexually transmitted viruses that leads to 6 types of cancer. Generally, where we see it the most is in the cervix, and although it can be found in other places and other kinds of cancer. We know that air pollution creates opportunities for cancerous cells, particularly when there are sources such as from construction sites and smokestacks, or secondary particles as we get from the industrialization, or secondary particles that we get from things such as automobile emissions. We know that there's also indoor pollution related from radon gas that's trapped in houses, exposures to asbestos and arsenic in our buildings. So we have a lot of pollution from the environment that can put us at risk for cancer. Last but not least, we know that there are many occupational hazards that create opportunities, exposure to carcinogenic agents such as heavy metals, air pollution, nail, look at the nail salons and all those things that we're doing. So we know that certain occupations can put you more at risk for development of cancer than others. In conclusion, it's important that we understand how a person's risk factors predispose them to the possibility of certain pathologies that take place. So in our role as nurses, we will continually be doing some profiling of our patients to understand what risk factors have they been exposed to that might explain the signs and symptoms that we see. So keep these in mind, because oftentimes we'll see patients over a period of time where cancer isn't what we're looking at. We're just dealing with the signs and symptoms of these exposures. But long-term exposure to these risk factors highly influence the possibility that a person may end up with cancer as they age.